이거 진짜 상징적인 거네.
Hi all, it's the Professor, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about principles of film form. Now I'm not going to be able to cover everything here in a lot of depth, but hopefully I'm able to give you some language that you can use when talking about film. And I'm going to be focusing on those primary elemental systems of film, particularly mise-en-scene, cinematography, editing, and sound. The moving image is one of the key drivers of 21st century communication. Right? Images are all around us, particularly in our global and digital age. They're always trying to convey information to us, to entertain us, to persuade us, often to sell us commodities. In a little more than 100 years, film has evolved into a complex art form. Most of us, hopefully, know that films are not real, but this wasn't necessarily always the case. We go all the way back to 1895 with the premiere of the Lumiere brothers' Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat. People actually ran out of the movie theater thinking the train was coming right towards them. And even though we know movies are not real, sometimes we have this visceral kind of reaction when we watch a film. Think of when people watch horror films, right? They often tense up, protecting their vital organs, even though, what we're watching is not real. And yet, film has that power over us, right? It can amaze us, it can entertain us, it can even enlighten us, and a really good film is able to do all three of those things. They're also able to transport us to places that we would otherwise never be able to go. For example, take the 20-minute plus Normandy landing sequence from Steven Spielberg's film, Saving Private Ryan. Spielberg brings the blood and bombs, bullets, and terror to us. The camera is frantic and all over the place. The sound is impressionistic. We feel like we are there. In truth, the scene was actually shot on a peaceful beach in Ireland. The art of filmmaking is its ability to make us feel like we are there, like we are part of the action. It can also be a very powerful empathy machine. So what is film? A better question might be, what drives film? And it's the same thing that drives most art: ideas. At 24 frames a second, film is expressed through its unique vocabulary. Film language evolves and changes and functions differently across cultures. For example, in an Ozu film, characters frequently sit and do little but think. Ozu images are taken very close to the floor, picturing persons who are already placed at a low angle to the world. Right? Film is central to our beliefs, to our customs, often represents how we understand the world, and we can learn a lot from watching films, particularly from other cultures, right? A film made in Africa, or a film made in Europe, or Japan, right? It's going to have a different cultural context. It can teach us a lot about ourselves, as well as other people. As Susan Sontag puts it in The Decay of Cinema, until the event of television emptied the movie theaters, it was from weekly visits to the cinema that you learned, or tried to learn, how to walk, to smoke, to kiss, to fight, to grieve. You wanted to be kidnapped by the movie. To be kidnapped, you have to be in a movie theater, seated in the dark among anonymous strangers. And if you're like me, certainly you are missing this activity, right, as COVID-19 limits the way that we can participate in film. So what do we mean when we talk about cinema versus a movie versus film? Well, essentially these are interchangeable terms, but they have different origins. Briefly, cinema comes from the Greek kinesis, which means movement, often implies art films like French cinema. Film refers to the original celluloid strip media, and movies is just short for motion pictures. Motion is the essence of the movie medium. Renowned film critic Laura Mulvey defined cinema as death at 24 frames a second. I now want to move to talk about the unique language of film. And I leave out a lot here in the interest of being brief, and this is really just a basic intro to the principles of film form. So cinematography is about shaping what we see, sound is about what we hear, and editing is making relationships between those two things. And there's a fourth major category to film studies, and that's mise-en-scène. And that's where I want to start. Alright, I'm switching over to my voice-over narration tone. The term mise-en-scène is often translated from the French as what goes in the scene, and a good way to understand the phrase is to think of it as involving all of the physical aspects of putting a film together, like staging. The locations, design, and composition of the sets, costumes, props, makeup, lighting, and even the acting style are part of the mise-en-scène. The term can be divided into two more categories, naturalistic and theatrical. Naturalistic mise-en-scène is about creating a believable and realistic world for the action of the film. To make Atanajawat the Fast Runner, the Inuit production team wanted to tell an authentic Inuit story, and so they consulted with elders about the oral history of the story. For aspects of the design, they filmed in the Canadian Arctic. Because the story is set in the past, all of the costumes, tools, and cultural practices such as hunting, driving dogs, and building igloos had to recreate a traditional Inuit way of life. Theatrical mise-en-scène is more expressive and less realistic and tends to heighten and exaggerate aspects of character and place for effect. Director Wes Anderson uses color to emphasize ideas, as in the Grand Budapest Hotel, where he fills a bright red elevator with hotel employees dressed in deep purple bellmen's uniforms, which helps the audience understand that the employees are colluding in their scheme. Both films work because of their verisimilitude. Roughly, the term means a convincing appearance of truth. Thus, whether the film is realist or anti-realist, most films work to convince you that you are really there by being internally consistent. Like most art, film tells a lie to get at the truth. It's perhaps why we can watch superhero films and usually not walk out of them. In the film Black Panther, the character who steals the limelight is not an actor, although it's a well-acted film. It's the setting, or mise-en-scène, Wakanda. Wakanda is a fictional hidden country in Africa that's never been colonized or conquered because it's sitting on a mass of magical metal that's transformed the nation into a technological wonder that's literally invisible to the outside world. It's impossible not to be enamored with Wakanda's golden city, an homage to Afrofuturism and Black creativity. The New Orleans-based production designer was Hannah Beechler, whose credits include Moonlight, Fruitvale Station, Creed, and Beyoncé's Lemonade. Cinematography is the process of capturing moving images on film or a digital storage device. The word comes to us from three Greek roots: kinesis, meaning movement, photo, meaning light, and graphic, meaning writing. It is closely related to still photography. The cinematographer, also known as the director of photography, uses the camera as a maker of meaning. Every shot is a thought, and the cinematographer, along with the production designer and costume designer, among others, work to convey the ideas in the director's head. There are various properties of cinematography, from quality, color, contrast, deep focus, shallow focus, rate, zoom, framing, angle, POV, long shot, type of close-up, pan, tilt, tracking, etc. Take the use of close-up, which also belongs to the world of editing, and Carl Theodor Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc. There is little depth to the image, no background, no set or shadows. The walls are painted pink to remove their glare. The director uses light and shadow carefully, and meaning and emotion are conveyed through Maria Falconetti's performance, filmed in close-up. The framing enhances her performance. One last example. Let's take a quick look at the water scene from Moonlight. The camera gets in the water with the young Chiron. Is there any other film where a drug dealer teaches a kid to swim? It's such a beautiful, tender, and transcendent moment. And it's one of my favorite scenes in cinema, made possible due to the cinematographic choices that were made. The basic creative force of filmmaking, editing is the process of selecting, arranging, and assembling the essential components of a movie. This includes visual, sound, and special effects, all combined to tell a story in a unique way. The editor controls what you see, when you see it, its speed and pace, and what you understand and feel about all this. Before digital editing, cutting and splicing was used. Hitchcock's expressionist shower scene from Psycho is so effective because of editor George Tomasini's incredible editing work and Hitchcock's approach to pure cinema, a desire to convey abstract emotional experiences through unique cinematic devices such as montage, camera movement and camera angles, sound-visual relationships, superimpositions and other optical effects, and visual composition. 78 setups and 52 cuts are used in 45 seconds of footage. Hitchcock and his team worked out a montage to convey the maximum impact since Hitchcock could not show a nude woman. Each edit, cut, was like a stab of the knife. The scene features jump cuts, wide shots to close-ups, 180-degree shifts in viewpoint, and an increase in speed to create a dizzying effect. While editing and cinematography are essential to all films, sound plays a major role in film and can be divided into three primary categories: speech, noise, such as sound effects, and music. Film primarily engages two senses, vision and hearing. Some filmmakers assume that the cinematographic image is the most important element, but what we hear on the screen can be at least as significant as what we see on it, and sometimes what we hear is more significant. As Steven Spielberg says, the eyes see better when the sound is great. The sources of sound in any given film are diegetic and non-diegetic, on-screen and off-screen, and internal and external sound. Diegetic sounds come from a source within a film's world. They are the sounds heard by both the movie's audience and characters. Non-diegetic sounds, which come from a source outside that world, are heard only by the audience. Take Jaws, for instance. First we hear only diegetic sound, and then we get the music. If you could hear that, you would get the hell out of the water as quick as you could. The musical choices affect how we relate and understand the images as well. Think of how important the soundtrack is in a Wes Anderson film, or how Stanley Kubrick makes use of the music of Ludwig van Beethoven in A Clockwork Orange. Alex's only good trait is his love for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, especially the setting of Ode to Joy, music that represents all that is most noble in the human spirit. Here, however, this music is used ironically to underscore Alex's desire to preserve his freedom to do what he wants, which consists mostly of violent acts, even though society tries to socialize him away from these acts through treatment that attempts to turn him into a clockwork orange. The choice to not use music can also change the feel of a scene or film, as we see in the Coen brothers' film No Country for Old Men. Their choice to forgo a conventional soundtrack and play with uncomfortable silence creates more intensity. All right, well, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this short lecture and some of the examples that I was able to bring in. Again, this was fairly brief, but hopefully it gives you a primer towards developing some of that critical language to talk about films. Anyways, I wish you the best in your film journey and your watching, and I hope to see you soon.